It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. US President Joe Biden is on his first Middle East tour since entering the White House. His tour began Wednesday in Israel, where he began meeting with leaders, including Prime Minister Yair Lapid and former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is set to make an unprecedented flight from Israel to Saudi Arabia, a route that's never been taken before by an American president, which really does signify how the US president is aiming for a normalisation of Israeli-Saudi ties amid Washington's tensions with Iran. Along with stabilising relations between US partners in the region, Biden is also looking to ease oil prices. He'll be meeting with Arab leaders while attending a summit of Gulf countries during his visit to Saudi Arabia. But as the US leader embarks upon this trip, questions remain over Washington's influence in the region. We discussed today what to expect with William F. Wexler, Senior Director of the Rafik Hariri Center and Middle East Programs at the Atlantic Council, and Pagondo, Professor of Euro-MENA Institute of Sogang University here in Seoul. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having us.
And Dr. Wexler, my first question to you. Now, Mr. Biden's trip to the Middle East, it comes 18 months into his presidency, and that's after he toured Europe and Asia. And amid the geopolitical and economic complexities that the world is facing, where would you put the Middle East on President Joe Biden's list of foreign policy priorities right now? I mean, what does he really need to get out of this meeting? Out of these series of meetings, rather?
Sure. I think President Biden and his team have been pretty disciplined and consistent. They've talked about how Russia presents the most immediate threat to global security, and that Chinese actions are presenting potentially the greatest strategic threat to global security. The Middle East is important, but is been secondary to great power competition. The reason why amongst the reasons why the trip is happening now, however, is because the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the sanctions that have resulted from that have taken a significant amount of oil off of the global markets, which has reinforced the understanding in Washington of the importance of the relationships with Saudi Arabia in particular and the wider Gulf region in general. President Biden had planned this trip to Israel before. Now it's finally happening, and it's a good time to also have a trip to Saudi Arabia.
Now, Professor Park, it's believed that President Biden won't be focusing so much on Israeli-Palestinian relations and will want to strengthen the Israeli-Arab network, notably between Tel Aviv and Riyadh. So how do you see the regional dynamics of this really playing out?
I think it takes more time to formalize the diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, because from the political point of view, it is quite right for Saudi Arabia to mend the fences with Israel, but the public opinion is not very favorable about Israel. And at the same time, as the Arabs are still wanting a lot of measures taken by Israel, particularly on the sufferings of the Palestinians, and it is quite difficult for normal Saudi Arabian citizens to accept the diplomatic relations setting up with Israel. So but in the broader picture, the cooperation between Saudi Arabia and Israel is really needed, because United States is rebalancing from Middle East to the Asia Pacific. So probably the President Biden will make a great effort, but I don't think at this time the diplomatic relation or normalization of the relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel would be a little bit difficult, and it takes more time than we expect.
And Dr. Wexler, how awkward is it going to be between President Biden and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman when they meet in Saudi Arabia? I mean, there's been criticism towards the US president for meeting with the controversial Saudi leader amid human rights concerns. How do you think the US leader should really handle this meeting?
Well, the U.S.-Saudi relationship was going to be reset. There are too many interests at stake to have the relationship broken forever. The only question was when and in what context the relationship was going to begin anew. And of course, since the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, there have been great concerns inside the United States about the nature of the relationship, and particularly with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. However, those concerns are very well understood by the administration, by the president. I think that it's been widely reported that it was a long process for the President of the United States to come to the conclusion that it was in the best interest of the United States for him to go to Saudi Arabia. But having made that decision that he's going to go, when they do meet, I don't expect any awkwardness. I expect professionals to be talking with each other. I expect a discussion about interests. And I suspect the kind of person-to-person relationship that's going to be absolutely critical in order for the relationship between the two countries to be able to serve U.S. interests.
And Dr. Wexler, before President Biden embarked upon this trip, there was a lot of talk about how the US is really going to recalibrate its relations with Middle Eastern countries. And while Jordan's King Abdullah II, he said he would support the formation of a Middle East military alliance quite similar to NATO. And there's been a lot of talk about a possible Middle Eastern NATO recently. So what is currently being discussed and how likely do you think this formation is?
Well, the most important negative factor that's happening in the Middle East writ large is the widespread perception of American withdrawal. That didn't start with the Biden administration. In fact, that's 3 or 4 administrations long, ever since our mistaken invasion of Iraq in 2003. So President Biden is looking to reverse that trend. Now, what is on the table is a deepening of cooperation, especially on maritime and air defense systems, both to keep the United States in and to take advantage of the new opportunities that have emerged from a relationship with Israel and the Gulf countries. That's what's on the table. That's what's being discussed. I wouldn't expect any breakthrough announcements. But as far as an overall NATO type agreement where there's the equivalent of an Article 5 legal responsibility to come to the aid, I don't expect that to be on the table. I don't think anyone is really looking for that. But what the Gulf countries and the countries in the Middle East are really looking for are some kind of tangible sign that America is not leaving and America is still committed to their security and the wider security of the region.
And of course, Professor Park, other US allies around the world are watching very closely and looking to see what the change of regional relations and dynamics in the Middle East really mean for America's East Asian allies as well, like South Korea, who have ties to the Middle East too, of course. And well, do you think that the recent change of dynamics is going to offer more stability, or are you expecting more regional tension?
Well, actually, from my own experiences, especially talking to my colleagues in the Middle East and visiting to the places in the last 6 months, I found out very interesting the change. Well, the region is entirely changing right now, and they are talking about the gone are the days with the U.S. working as the unipolar world, and they are not talking about the multipolar. They are talking about the interconnected world. They are actually right now prepared to closely cooperate with any country, like be it Russia or be China. So the United States should make a great effort to mend fences with the traditional regional allies, especially Arab countries. Otherwise, actually, it will be a very difficult situation. Play for Korea, because the stability and the security are the 2 most important keywords, not only for the world, but also for the Korea, because 60% of our energy resources coming from that region through the Strait of Hormuz. If anything happens over there, just one night, and the Korea economy will be broken entirely. And also the world economy also will be broken entirely. So we need a great stability in the region, and United States should not make any impression that it is leaving the region and make a great promise to its traditional allies that United States is taking care of the region without leaving or without without any problem.
And Dr. Wexler, now another huge part of why President Biden is making this trip is to stabilise energy supplies and energy prices, which are surging all around the world. Do you expect to see any developments on that front?
Over time, they won't see an immediate response of the kind that will result in prices plummeting at the gas pump in America. But Saudi Arabia is still the swing producer of oil in the world. If you look at where excess capacity does exist in the world, you're looking really at Saudi Arabia and the UAE today. So on the margins, there are some actions that could be taken. And this is definitely one of the key reasons why the United States has deep interest in the region, and the professor was exactly right, why the United States cannot afford to be seen as withdrawing from the region.
Professor Park, now, do you expect to see a breakthrough happening anytime soon in efforts to revive the Iran nuclear deal?
Well, the Iranian problem is really serious for Korea, especially because we have to give back the $7 billion to Iran, and it is a really, really difficult situation. Actually, it is making a really difficult situation for Korea. And the relationship between Korea and Iran is worse than ever. It's really worst. So we always pray that the United States will make a great stride in the reviving the Iranian nuclear deal. But I think probably President Biden will make a great effort. But I think it is a little bit difficult for United States to revive the deal before the election. But possibly after the election, and the revival would be possible. And probably this time, President Biden will try to allay anxieties from both the Israeli side and also the Arab side that the revival of the nuclear deal with Iran is much better than without deal. So I hope this time there will be a great progress for the revival of the JCPOA.
Of course, but indirect talks last month, they failed to go through, they failed to produce any outcomes. And Dr. Wexler, do you see any chances of a Iran nuclear deal being revived anytime soon, especially as Iran really reacts to Mr. Biden's trip in the Middle East, where he's trying to bring Israel and Saudi Arabia together?
Anytime soon, no, quite frankly. And the reason why is because Iran doesn't have an interest in doing the deal. And they made that clear in any number of ways. And from the first instance, there are no direct talks at Iran's insistence. They're only doing indirect talks. And they have insisted upon a non-nuclear issue about the designations and sanctions that the United States has on the IRGC for terrorism, for their acts of terrorism, in order for the deal to go forward, which is great irony, because when the deal was originally negotiated, Iran was insistent that nothing other than the nuclear issues be on the table. And now they want something outside the parameters of the nuclear deal on the table. And President Biden just said today that he will not remove the IRGC from the American list of terrorist organizations. So the deal is available for Iran, but I don't see Iran taking it. What the rest of the region is very concerned with is Iranian malign behavior of their given precision weaponry and having their proxies use it across borders, and that has not stopped, unfortunately. And I believe that is going to be the discussion that President Biden is going to have both in Israel and in Saudi Arabia.
Well, that was William Wexler, Senior Director of the Rafik Hariri Center and Middle East Programs at the Atlantic Council, and Pagondor, Professor at the Euromina Institute of Seogang University. Thank you both so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.